Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Oh boy. Well, that was
So
kind of productive because now the elevator music stopped.
did it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. The only bad part is I think we lost that whole recording.
I see. Oh boy. Well, you
All
better
right,
give them the intro then.
let's start this off again in 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to the frickin' Frac podcast, brought to you by Perry County Whitetails, world famous YouTube channel with all 7 subscribers in 3 countries. So let's welcome in this humongous audience. Frac, how you doing?
Good, good. Who is our special guest today?
Guest?
Yeah.
You hear
Who we
somebody
have?
laughing in the background? That'd be Mrs. Fric.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
Yeah. So anyways, I am based out of Perry County, Pennsylvania. Kyle is on temporary West duty, currently in Boise, Idaho, or in the Boise area. Anyways.
Yeah. Meridian. Them Boise people are a little too city for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because Meridian's way out in the country.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So let's get down to brass tacks here. We're talking this first episode. Frac had a successful elk hunt. Archery elk hunt, nonetheless.
Getting her done with the bow. Can you believe it?
Right. I can. Especially since it's an RX1 Hoyt.
Yeah, that's true. And we're professionals, so.
That's right. The Hoyt reps just don't know that yet. I'm waiting on that call. After they hear this first podcast, man, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to get an unlisted number.
Yeah, probably. Yep. Yeti, Hoyt. All the big elk guys out here will probably be lining up to have us as guests soon.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So anyway, give us a little background on your successful elk hunt here. How did this journey start, and what is your top of the line equipment you want to mention so that everybody runs out and buys some?
Well, how did this year or this whole journey?
This whole journey.
3-year journey. Well, it all started when the Lord called me to Bible Institute, which happened to be in Idaho.
Wait a minute. You mean you're going to blame all this on the Lord?
Well, I'm going to give him credit.
Okay, well, that's better, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm living in Idaho, and of course, I'm not going to not hunt it. So
yeah.
So it all started in just waiting to become a resident, which took 6 months. And then in about August of 2019, I bought my first Idaho hunting license and elk tag, deer tag, and took my first hunt that year. I think it was August 30th. I think it was 95 degrees.
Yeah, you can check out some of the highlights from that hunt on our YouTube channel.
Yeah. And believe it or not, we actually, old cousin Joe there, he, not really my cousin, but we'll just call him Cousin Joe. Me and him went out and tried to kill an elk. Him being from Texas and me, beloved Perry County. But
Yeah.
you can say that hunt was about as miserable as they come. But
Oh yeah.
oh man, it was
So
hot, so hot. Go ahead.
elk in Perry County, or hunting deer in Perry County.
Half the question got cut off. I didn't hear half of it.
I said, are you saying that hunting elk in Idaho is just a little bit different than hunting white-tailed deer in Perry County?
Oh man, it's a little different. It's about completely opposite for some of it. I mean, today the similar too, though. You know, there's days of just not seeing anything. We've all been down that road, but
Yeah. So you go out your first year, you hike, you basically familiarize yourself with the terrain in Idaho. And how would you say that's different than Perry County?
I think the biggest difference would be public land, right? I mean, there's just so much public land available to you. And then, which is an awesome thing, but an overwhelming thing. I mean, that first year was basically a wash. With just I don't know how to describe it other than with going out there and just being completely overwhelmed with size and obstacles and terrain. I mean, you can hike a mile straight up a hill, straight up a mountain, and every time you think you're almost to the top, I mean, it just keeps going. In that first year, I was just completely outgunned, and what I mean by that, I mean gear wise. I just thought I was going to buy the $40 pair of boots on sale at Sportsman's Warehouse and hike up these hills and mountains. And I mean, I had blisters the size of a quarter. I mean, that first year I hunted the first weekend of September and the last weekend of September. And the first weekend was 95 degrees, and the last weekend there were snow flurries blowing around. So,
Yeah.
I just wasn't prepared.
Yeah. What about the size of the country compared to what most guys are used to hunting back east? So I get off work early. I just run out and jump in a tree stand quick, have a quick, hour and a half hunt. Not so in Idaho.
No, it's not. I mean, I've driven anywhere from well, what did we do last year? 3.5 hour drive just to get to where we wanted to hunt.
Yeah.
And I mean, even the shortest hunts I've done an hour at least, and that's just to get in just outside of town far enough to start hunting some deer. But that's got to be when they've migrated down out of the mountains. So it's just overwhelming at first. You could walk around all day and not see anything. You could not. I mean, you might come across a track, but there's just vast expanses of country with no animals.
Yeah.
So if you want to hunt the haystack method, you can, but boy, is it dull.
So then year 2, I came out for how long were we in the backcountry when I came out? 5 days, 4
Oh,
days?
yeah, I think we had a solid 4 in there. I mean, yeah, even um, even the second year was a little overwhelming, right? So
Yeah, that was the first time I was any west. That was the farthest west I've ever been. So the farthest west I'd been before was Nebraska,
mm.
and yeah, I mean, we got into elk the very first morning when I was out there. We we stumbled into a bull nest and managed to screw it up royally.
Oh yeah. But I think we learned something there too. I think I don't think it was all for naught. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? I think, you know,
yeah. So the year I went out, I bought a over-the-counter tag for a unit that had limited tags. I basically sat at the computer until the tag went on sale, and I had everything copied and pasted to my clipboard. So when the time came, boom, 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 I got the tag. I think it took me a total of about 26 seconds or something back. And in 26 seconds, I still got the 12th tag. So it's it's a little difficult if you're a non-resident to get a good tag. It seems like to me, anyways.
yeah. Yeah, that tag there, I would say it wasn't quite over the counter, but it wasn't quite,
A draw
controlled
either.
hunt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the middle. And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
How
it's
many
a
tags
pretty
were
loose
there?
tag. There's
How
a
many tags
total of
were there for me?
there was 1,000 tags for that archery hunt.
And yeah, and for non-residents, I think how many were there?
I think
I think
you had 77 available.
yeah, yeah, something like that. So that was kind of a hard tag to get. I still have that tag. I have yet to eat it. It's printed on glossy paper. I probably would have ate it by now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's yeah.
So then
I maybe Mrs. Frac can look up her favorite recipe. See how you wanted that
yeah,
done.
I wonder how that would taste sauteed up with some vegetables. So, anyways, last year you were successful in a pronghorn hunt
Yeah, yeah.
with
Last
the old
day I could hunt that.
Max.
Say that again, and you broke
I
up a little
said with
bit.
the old Hoyt Power Max.
Oh yeah, yeah. The Power Max gets it done again.
And
Yeah,
then, so that was the first thing you killed in Idaho, right?
that was the first tag I punched in Idaho. Yeah,
Yeah. And this bull elk that we're about to talk about is the second tag that you have
second
punched in
tag.
Idaho.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was Pope and Young, about of an inch.
P and Y. How many inches does it have to be Pope and Young?
Well, I think 67. I think
Okay.
I could be totally wrong, but I'm gonna
Yeah.
claim it.
Well, I think I'm still yet to shoot a Pope and Young buck in Perry County, so you're way ahead of me.
Oh man, they're running around everywhere.
Yeah. So anyway, we come to this year, and I had a feeling right from the start that you were going to be successful. I can't really just say why I knew that, but I told you as much.
You did, yes. And I was wondering where you got that too, actually.
Sometimes you just know.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad
So
you knew.
so tell us your latest and greatest hunting story?
Well, I put in for a controlled hunt this year for an elk, and I put it in. I put in for an archery hunt in a unit that's the closest here to Boise, Idaho, because that unit is currently infested with elk. Is what is the quote I was given? Infested with elk.
Oh, okay. So they have an elk problem there. You needed to help them out with.
I did. They do, and I thought I was the prime candidate, but the random drawing deemed that I wasn't. So hence the over-the-counter tag. I had a good friend. We had decided to hunt together this year, and this guy, he's a elk killer. So certified elk killer. And I unfortunately to
No, we had some extenuating circumstances.
yeah. So with him, and really, I just to gain some knowledge and experience from someone who's gotten it done with a bow on an elk. So I actually had made a scouting trip in August, which I had never done before. That's not really the Perry County Whitetails way.
No, pretty much just wait for the last second and poke and hope.
Yeah. So I had and this guy kind of we picked out a spot. Well, he did, and of course I'm going to defer to him because he's actually killed an elk. So so we went up to this spot scouting, and the first thing we do is jump a nice mule deer buck. And if there's one thing that these muleys have on a Perry County whitetail is, man, they just go wide quick. You look at one of these mule deer out here, and man, that's the first thing you notice is how wide they go. So we had jumped that buck on a little bench, and then continued up the hill and actually ran into some cow elk. So we, based on that intel, we decided that indeed was a good spot to start hunting elk this year. So,
do you have a mule deer tag this year?
I do, yeah, I do.
Did you get the combo again, or whatever it's called?
Yeah, I got the Sportsman's combo, so I have a lot of tags in my pocket. So that's good. Basically, anything that goes running by, I can shoot at.
Yeah, buddy, that's what we like.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I don't understand these people that go hunting and they deem the hunt a success because they had such a close, meaningful relationship with nature while they were out. Do you get that?
No, I don't even like hiking unless I'm allowed to kill something along the way.
To me, it's not much of a success unless something dies.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've taken my bow on a 10-mile hike before, and
yeah, that's like I went to work and worked all week, and they didn't pay me, but I really enjoyed driving that truck, so it was a successful week.
Yeah. So needless to say, I have some tags I can fill. There with the Sportsman's combo, you're given pretty much a tag for every predator. So you get your elk and your deer, and then a lot of the predator species, wolf, bear, mountain lion. But
yeah,
I mean, the wolves, I mean, they're a problem. So I have no qualms about shooting a wolf.
Yeah, amen, brother.
It's funny about all these liberals who want to save the wolves, but I don't ever see them chaining themselves to a wolf or crawling down in a wolf den. What's up with that?
How about it?
But anyway, I digress.
Weekend was a smashing failure.
The opening weekend, you said?
Yeah.
Oh boy. I had anxiously awaited opening weekend. It's not hunting's hunting, right?
Right.
I know we get the opening day jitters and can't sleep the night before. So excited to go. It's just the same thing out here, man. I wasn't able to go opening day. I had to wait till opening weekend, oh man, it was terrible waiting them days, knowing that people were out there possibly shooting elk.
They were all out there shooting your elk.
Yeah. So, but that first weekend was, let me think. We head up. This was something new this year too. The guy I went with had a family cabin up there, so we got to stay. I didn't have to sleep on the ground.
What a pansy!
I know, it just doesn't even seem like Western hunting without sleeping.
Right, man. I can't believe that you can hold your head up after that. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I didn't even. Yeah, I took all that stuff out of my pack, so that was nice. That was nice. But anyway, so we head up opening morning to this spot we scouted out, and we're sitting at the end of this 2-mile road, in our parking spot. We were glad nobody was in our parking spot, but probably about 20 minutes before the first crack of light, a truck comes flying up the road behind us, and he stops and talks to us and says, "All right, if you guys are going that way, I'll go this way." So that was kind of the start of the hunting season. So our secret honey hole spot apparently was no longer secret. But I really can't describe or waste much time on that first weekend other than, I mean, we took the same taken spotting or I mean, we didn't see any sign of life. Nothing. We couldn't even jump a deer, I mean, I think that first day we put on, I'm going to say almost 10 miles. And we got into some country where we were side hilling, and it was pretty miserable for most of the day. Set up in a meadow for the hottest part of the day with a wallow nearby and a stream going through it. And yeah, we couldn't buy a sign of life that day. And then the following day, I mean, we went to a totally new spot. We hiked through about a 4-mile burn to get to this drainage. And that was probably about the most miserable hike I ever have taken. Just imagine a hurdle every 10 feet, basically, for miles. So, but same thing.
There's a lot of deadfall.
Yeah, it had burned about 10 years prior, so there was just dead trees laying everywhere.
Yeah. I watched videos of elk going through deadfalls, and they just look like they're taking a walk in the park.
Yeah. It's probably what. Yeah. They have the advantage. They have it. So
yeah.
So yeah, that first weekend was just, I wouldn't say it was even very profitable. It was actually demoralizing because it had gotten so hot in the afternoons. It was like, what are we doing? What are we doing here?
What kind of temperatures were you looking at?
Mid 80s, and at 7,000 feet, that's pretty depressing. Because, I mean, you gain that, and you're thinking, oh, it'd be cooler up there, but it was still hot and miserable.
Yeah.
But that all sets up the next weekend. So maybe we should get into that.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know. I don't know what the. Yeah, I was gonna say. I don't know what the ideal length of a podcast is, but
I don't think we talked about anything yet.
I know. Well, you're gonna have to. You of course are the master editor, so you're gonna have to figure out what's podcast worthy and what's not.
Yeah.
So
just edit out all the boring parts.
yeah.
So we'll probably have a podcast about 6 minutes long.
Yeah,
After we
probably.
talk for about an hour.
So what's next? Where do you think I should go now?
Oh, man. Just tell us the story.
All right, so we leave the area, and I don't want to be giving away all my honey holes. The professionals never do that, so I'll refrain from that. But we leave the area around Cascade, Idaho.
You're not supposed to give away them honey holes, buddy.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, it's touristy. It's real touristy there. You wouldn't want to go there anyway. And I shot the only elk that was living. So we leave that weekend, and we're pretty demoralized. So we head back down. They call it the valley. We're in the Treasure Valley. We're back down in the valley. We got our butt whooped. We didn't even see an animal, although we did see a buck right next to the road on the way out. But you know how that goes.
Yeah, I do.
Well, that week I'm watching the weather. Right? I need the weather to break. I don't need it to be 85 degrees while I'm hiking around trying to kill elk. So that Friday, there's a big front coming through with some thunderstorms and dropping the temperatures. And if there's anything Perry County has taught me about hunting, it's watch those cold fronts coming through. So I just knew that I needed to be up there that next Saturday morning. I have learned about hunting weather out here. You might as well just save your time, because the way the mountains are and just how nasty it can get all of a sudden, you're better off just staying at camp or staying at home. There's just no point. The animals hole up and you're just out there. And then in some of the areas we were in, were pretty remote.
What do you mean by weather? You mean like if it's raining or snowing or what?
Yeah. Yeah, you might as well just stay dry. Once you get wet, when you get wet in the mountains, it adds a whole nother element. And yeah, it's pretty early, but you do that in November, you get wet and turned around in a snow squall, you might be in some trouble. But
yeah.
Anyway, so that Saturday morning, I knew I needed to be up there. And Friday, I happened to get a text from old cousin Joe there. He had thought he was going elk hunting with somebody else, but he texted me and said, "Hey, do you want someone to go with you? I'm not going with the other guy." And I said, "Sure. If anything, you can help me pack out an elk if I would happen to get one." So I had somebody go with me, which is always better, I think, on an elk hunt, especially with the bow.
So would
So
you
we
do it
head up there. Go ahead.
as far as solo hunting? Would you recommend it?
Only if you have to.
Yeah. I mean, having
I
killed an elk, like if you'd have killed that solo, what kind of condition would you be in?
Oh man, I don't even know how much harder it would have made it. It might have made it 5 to 10 times harder. Because
Yeah.
how are you quartering up an animal solo? And I know there's guys that do it. There certainly are, but that's not my skill level yet. So I think that extra guy was priceless in some of that.
Yeah.
Hiking that thing down the mountain.
So you get up at what time Saturday morning?
Oh, I think my alarm went off at 2:50. I was probably out of bed by 3, and Joe pulled in my driveway at 3:30.
Yeah. So it takes a little
if you think,
bit higher level of dedication than it does back here.
yeah, because you got about a 2-hour drive before you're going to even do anything.
Yeah.
So, but I knew I had to be out there for that front. I knew it. You wait all year for a hunting season that's 1 month, so you better figure out if you really want to be out there hunting or not.
Yeah. So what time did you get to where you started hunting?
I think we got to our parking spot about 5:55.
Yeah.
So, and it had rained the night before, and I was really checking the road to see if anyone. This road from the scouting trip, we found out that people do camp at the end of it, and in Idaho on public land, you never know if someone's just camping to camp or somebody's hunting. You just never really know. There's people who just go out in the wilderness and camp, which it's America. It's a free country for now. You can do that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So I did not see tracks going into that camping spot, which was very encouraging. I mean, there's just something about knowing that you're the first guy in there out here.
Yeah.
That's just, back home, we're so used to private, and if anyone else is there, they better be getting off the land. But here, it's anyone's land.
Right.
So and daylight was 6:40, so I figured about 6:30 we'd throw all our gear on and stand on that road until we could hike comfortably, and I mean not tripping all over the brush and everything like that. I wanted enough light to be able to see. So it was probably about 6:35, and from, I mean, right from the end of that road, man, right from the end of the road where people camp, just as it cracked daylight, I heard the perfect 5-note, just perfect bugle. Man, that was a beauty of a bugle that guy let out.
I didn't know that we had 5 notes. Did you tell the elk that it's supposed to have that?
No, that was the guy who had camped there overnight. So I looked at Joe and I said, "Oh man, it was a good one. It was a doozy."
Were you fooled?
No, I looked at Joe and said, "Man, that was a beautiful bugle from that guy."
Sometimes I wonder about our calling techniques. If the animals listening to them are laughing.
They might be, yeah.
I was turkey hunting one time, and I heard this hen yelping, and I thought, that is a hunter. Sure as shooting, that's got to be a hunter, because that is the most awful turkey call I have ever heard in my life. And 10 minutes later, in walks a hen who did not know how to turkey call.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'm thinking the animals are maybe not quite as good at calling as the humans are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So
needless to say that again.
so what happened next?
Well, me and Joe kind of stood there looking at each other, him hauling around, and I'm thinking, is my hunt over? Because he's the direction I want to go. And all that him hauling around, he lets out two more perfect bugles from the end of this road. And I just made the decision. I said, Joe, we got to get up this mountain. So I knew, and this was the thing I learned from an old timer, that old timer I went scouting with. There was a bench about 250 yards above the road. And when I say bench, I'm talking about the side of the mountain, and then it just kind of tables off for a little bit and then keeps going back up. And that old timer told me, man, them elk will just come to those little benches and they just like the flat stuff. They like the flat stuff. And I knew that bench was up there, and we had found sign there the week before as far as, elk rubs and some tracks and scat. And I figured, let's just get up to that bench and see what happens. So we really just started hiking up the side of the mountain from the road. And I'm presuming that guy at the end of the road started hiking too. Because at this time, I mean, now the sun's not up yet, but it's shooting light at the very least, right?
Yeah.
So we start heading up the side of the mountain, and elk hunting and deer hunting, that at least the deer hunting I was used to from Perry County, are different I mean, you can hike at elk, you can break branches, you can just bust through some brush, and you could never do that to a whitetail, right? They'd be out of there before you ever even knew they were there.
Right.
Well, that old timer, when me and him were doing that, when we were hiking up the side of the mountain, if I had stepped on a log or snapped a branch, he just let out some soft cow calls. And I thought, that's pretty much a great idea. So I'd say about 100 yards, 150 yards up that mountain, and I mean, we're hoofing it, like we're out of breath. I'm trying to get ahead of this other guy, and at some point we stop, and I just let out a couple cow calls, and in the opposite direction of the guy bugling down the road, I heard a bugle, and it was more of a bugle with a growl in it. And it wasn't like a the 5-tone, like screaming all over the side of the mountain bugle. It was just like almost like a half bugle with some tone and some like personality to it. And I looked at Joe and I said, no, I think that's an elk. And I'm not sure if he bugled again or I cow called back at him or something. But from that point forward, we literally were elk hunting. We knew we had an elk around us, and unfortunately, he was up the mountain, and there was a saddle that was way up there that I knew about. And we were kind of in between drainages. And if you know anything about the topography out here, I mean, we weren't hunting in any sort of open country, but the drainages are really, really thick. We've had a drought out here, a long drought. So those drainages are where the water drains off the mountain, and usually they'll stay green all year round.
Yeah.
So I knew that elk.
They're thick. I can attest to that.
Yeah, thick and miserable to get through.
Yes.
So
you will learn the definition of climbing downhill.
yes.
Anyway,
Yes, will, yeah.
Go ahead.
So we made it up to that bench, and by this time, Joe had let out a few bugles. And it's important to note to add that Joe had only learned to bugle within the last couple weeks. And at times I could tell. But I think that goes back to the point we made earlier.
Yeah.
That not everything has to be crystal clear perfect.
Right.
And it might actually work out to our benefit that Joe was putting some personality into it, if you know what I mean. He was trying to agitate this bull.
Right.
And so we get up to this bench. I should say this, about 50 to 80 yards into our hike up the mountain, I could smell elk. It was prevalent. And the whole side of the mountain was torn up. It looked like cattle had gone through there.
Right.
And if you smell elk, I mean, you don't really forget the smell. A lot of people say it's like a barnyard. I don't know. Would you agree with that?
I would agree that, like, back home here, I have on occasion smelled like a doe in heat. Like if you cross a trail where a doe has gone through, I have smelled that very faintly. But out there, the smell of an elk is very distinct and very strong if you're anywhere close to where they're at. Like if the wind changes a certain way and it starts blowing from them to you, you can smell it a good ways off. And I mean, last year was the first time I was ever elk hunting, and it was very distinct to me.
Yeah. Do you remember we were sitting in that saddle and did you smell elk that day when we were sitting there? Like, man, I smell elk.
Yeah.
But yeah,
let's not talk about that day.
It was so I could smell elk, and I could see elk sign everywhere, and I had a bugling bull up the mountain. So we get to that bench, and he's still above us. And the two thoughts I was having the whole time I was always under the assumption that, and I'm not totally wrong by this, but from what I thought prior to this year and other years was that, okay, you get a bull bugling and like you bring him to you with your bugles. I flipped that on its head. I kept looking back at Joe every time he would bugle, and we'd get like pinpoint his location a little bit better. That we need to get up to him. We need to get up to him. So once we got up on that bench, I knew he was still above us and almost at the head of this drainage, which he was. And I looked back at Joe, and I said, "All right, Joe, he's bugling, sometimes on top of this elk and sometimes not." The elk didn't necessarily go quiet for very long ever. during all this. Maybe 8 minutes at one point we didn't hear him. I think that at least, and this is something else that was kind of interesting. There were times where he would just let out like a groan, like a oh, like just the weirdest, like either like an irritated, I'm over here, why can't I see you, or why aren't you coming to me, or I don't know what he was thinking, but elk are vocal and social creatures, and once we get to I killed him, but so I look back at Joe and I said, all right, rake a tree. So he's back there, and man, he did an awesome job. He was back there, everything I asked him to do, man, he was on it. And so here we are, we're on this bench. I know that's where the elk like to be. And I know what I'm thinking is, and what I still think is, that was pretty much his bedroom, because there were scrapes, and not scrapes, but rubs. I don't think that elk necessarily scrape like a whitetail, but they might. I just might not know enough about them. But all his rubs were in there. So, and I knew there were wallows in that area too, which is good when it's hot, but not necessarily. This was like I said, that front had gone through, so this was a cool morning. It was probably 40 degrees at the highest. So we're up on that bench, and we're talking back and forth, and he's still above us. But we have to head into that drainage where it's real thick. And man, sure enough, you could see where those elk would exit and enter the drainage, and had basically worn down a path through all this thick stuff. And so we just continued to go towards this elk that was bugling, and we were almost on his level. And I hear it from all the professionals, all the elk guys, all those guys get on their level. And the reason you do that is thermals, right? Whether your wind's blowing up the mountain or down the mountain, if you're on their level, it shouldn't be blowing to them, theoretically.
Yeah.
So I hop on this elk trail, and I start heading towards them. And at this point, we went from going straight up the mountain to side hilling through this elk trail. And I get eyes on him as we leave this bench. And I see him, and I see that he's a bull. And it's hard to describe. You know it. I mean, it's one thing to jump a deer, but it's another thing to see some elk walking around.
Yeah.
It's just impressive. Yeah. To see their size. So I see him. He's up above us. He's probably 150 yards when I catch a glimpse of him. And I had him. I knew that he was a bull, which was pretty exciting, to say the least. I knew that he was not a spike, which was really exciting, because as much as I'm a meat hunter, I sure would like some elk antlers on the wall.
That's right.
So,
Man,
so that was exciting. So I see him, and but when I see him, he's headed up the mountain. He's not necessarily in a hurry, but he's not like standing around looking. He's just walking up the mountain, slightly towards us, but more up the mountain. You're not going to beat an elk to the top of the mountain. Not if he's on a mission. You're just not going to do it. So as soon as he's out of in, I tell Joe, we need to move up. We need to move up. I saw him. We need to move up. And meanwhile, every now and then, even when I'm not expecting him or wanting him to, Joe is ripping off a bugle. And I did most of the cow calling. Every now and then I'd let out a cow call, but the last thing you want to do is bugle or cow call when an elk can see you or pinpoint you and not see an elk, because then they'll bust. So we're heading up this elk trail right at him, basically, and I'm within 150 yards. And at this point, I slow down a little bit. I really wasn't sure if at one point I was going to step out into a little bit of an opening and we were going to see each other and he was going to bolt, because I saw where he kind of went and he was still above us, and I knew I needed to get on his level. So we continued up towards him. And then the next time he talked, there was a lot of thick stuff in between me and the elk. And he almost sounded below me. And I was like, oh no, I overcompensated here. I went too high. The thermals are blowing straight down the mountain. If I mess this up, it's because I got too aggressive. But I'm still on this elk trail, and from there, okay, I'm still thinking the elk is a little bit below me, but I know he's close. And at that point, I started looking at shooting lanes and just being really aware of where, what my surroundings were in case I just needed to draw my bow and shoot. And I wasn't really content or happy with where I was. There wasn't a lot of lanes, and I think even if there was, the furthest one was like 20 yards. Because at this point, we're entering into this thick stuff. And I'm looking back at Joe, and I'm signaling and I'm going to keep moving up and stay behind me, but I need the caller behind me to try to bring the bull across my path, right? So we did that slingshot method, and he was always at least 30 yards behind me. I probably would recommend more, but it was pretty thick in there, so it didn't hurt us at all. So I'm sneaking up through in this thicker stuff on this elk track, and basically this drainage, this real thick stuff, I kind of got to the top of it. If you think of the mountain from the bottom to the top, I kind of got to the top of it, and the thick stuff just kind of opened up and petered out. And I'm thinking, wow, if there ever was a spot to shoot an elk, this would be a cool one. And and the way the mountain was shaped, it kind of did like, it went out from me and was kind of rounded. And then there was this little dip at the head of this drainage. It might have dipped down about 8 feet, and then it just shot right back up the mountain. So there was almost like this little shelf right beyond the dip. And I was like, man, I wonder how far that is, because this elk is close. Last time I heard him, it sounded like he was below me. And if he's continues up like I saw him the last time, it'd be nice if he popped out on there. So I ranged it, and it was 52 yards. Well, there was something about the spot where it almost, it was good, but it just wasn't, I don't know, maybe it's that Frac the Hunter intuition or whatever it is. Something said, move up a little bit more. And I don't know, there might have been a branch or a tree, or I didn't like the way I was standing there. Another good tip if you're elk hunting is don't stand behind stuff. Stand in front of it, because the last thing you want to do is cut yourself off from an opportunity to shoot an elk with having whatever you stood behind in between you and the elk. So I moved up. I never ranged again until later, but I moved up and I figured it to be about 10 yards. And I got into a spot that I was really comfortable with as far as shooting lane. If you think about it, if I'm on the side of this mountain, I'm not looking up and down the mountain, I'm looking straight across the mountain. Directly to my left was all the thick stuff, and it almost made like a line. Like if you think about it, down the mountain to my left is all thick stuff. I have no shot. Straight ahead of me, I have a perfect shooting lane with the tiniest little pine tree branch sticking out. And to my right, I pretty much have a lot of shooting lanes up the mountain. So we get, and I just stopped there. I look back. Joe just I kind of motioned, just kind of find a spot, settle down, do what you got to do. I might have let out a cow call or two. Not sure at this point. Can't really remember. Unfortunately, when I handed Joe the camera that morning, the battery was dead. We probably wouldn't even be doing this podcast otherwise if that camera wouldn't have been dead. But that's just how it goes sometimes. So there we are. I'm in what I feel like it's a pretty good spot, and Joe's settled in where he is, and it couldn't have been a minute or two more. But I look straight down that shooting lane, and wouldn't you know, I see a head and antlers come out, and that bull took about 3 steps out into that shooting lane and just kind of cocked his head to the side and looked directly at me. So here I am, face to face with a bull elk. I'm thinking I'm about 40 yards, but he's got me. He's got me pinned down. He's looking right at me. He's looking right at me. I don't know if I was sticking too far out from the tree I was next to or what, but I had a good shooting lane, and just something in that moment said, okay, he sees you. And I've seen it on other hunting videos. They don't necessarily bolt. Something, I just thought to myself, I'm going to have to draw on this bull with him staring right at me. And
yeah, which is totally contrary. It's totally contrary to what you would do on a whitetail if he had to drop on you.
Yeah, it sure is.
As soon as you move, he's gone, which is probably what you're thinking in that moment.
Yeah. I really didn't think that he would, stare at me for a while and keep walking. I think he had me pegged pretty good. And I lost what I was thinking. Oh, there was something I was thinking. So I'm standing there with my bow in my hand. And, this is the other thing. Nerves. Generally, and especially for something I've waited for 3 years to even have the opportunity to do, I can remember shooting that antelope, and I was a nervous wreck. When I say that when I killed that antelope, I was lucky I hit him. How bad I was shaken and nervous and had a little bit of panic. It was total opposite with the elk. And I don't know if it was the duration of the experience to where nerves had a chance to calm down or what. But really, I can't really remember shaking in my boots like I have standing in front of I wouldn't say I really. Even just a scrub buck back home, you can get pretty worked up, nervous.
Yeah.
And even with 38 special that one morning, we had him at 60 yards, So nerves weren't really a factor, surprisingly. And I had a good buddy from Johnny Moonwalker Guide Services relay the story to me over and over how he missed a bull at 15 yards just because of nerves, and he forgot to look through his peep. And when I had my stare down with that elk, I thought, all right, draw on him, look through your peep, put your 40 on his vitals, and pull the trigger. And once I made that decision, there was no hesitation. I drew my bow back, looked through my peep. Go ahead.
Did the elk flinch or jump or anything whenever you drew, or just stood there?
He just stared at me.
Huh.
And I can say that I'm not so sure how sound this is with bow technique or not, but I literally did it all in one fluid motion.
Yeah.
As soon as the split second that I was anchored and had my 40 on the vitals, I let that arrow go.
Yeah.
So I did that and let that arrow go. And from everything that I remember, I do remember thinking it might have been a touch high. But that elk, as soon as I let that arrow go, basically whirled completely around and just went the direction that he came. He went kind of side-hilled back, and as soon as, it wasn't 3 more steps and he was back in that thick stuff, and I had no idea. I couldn't see him from there. So the first thing I did is I looked back at Joe and I said, Joe, did you see the arrow? Did you see what happened? And I look at Joe and he kind of gives me the look of, he kind of waves his head back and forth over his head, as in like, I think you shot high. I think you shot high is sort of what he mouthed and was signaling. And oh man, the bottom fell out of my spirits, because that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Shooting lane, there was just this tiniest of branch that was a little bit poking out of the thick stuff, and I was like, man, I wonder if I hit that branch. Well, and this is only a matter of seconds after the shot went off, and I looked back and talked, and I was, Joe, what do you think happened? He gave me that signal, and I heard, we both later, as we told each other the story of what happened, thought we heard him stumble or something. It wasn't like the crashing of a dying animal, but we heard something.
Right.
So I looked back at Joe, and I kind of got my wits about me again. I said, bugle, cow call, bugle, cow call, and no other reason of, I always see them do it in the hunting videos, right? And I've asked people, and it's a tactic. Maybe if they're hit and dying or liver hit or something, maybe they'll think you were an elk and not tear off 5 miles, because we all know how these animals are. Whether it's a whitetail deer, I've seen, Kurt blew an arrow through that one deer the one year, a couple years ago, and we found tons of blood and never found the deer. You know what I mean? Like, these things have a will to survive. And so Joe comes up to me from where I'm standing, and I'm pretty excited, nervous. All the emotions are running through at this point, and I want to go see where he was standing. Joe's like, hold on, let's give it a minute. So we're both talking, yeah, I think it's high. I think it's high too. And then I'm like, oh man, I've waited this long. Did I screw this shot up? Did I screw it up? And I'm not good at standing around not going to at least check to see if I can find my arrow. So that's what I do. I go to the spot. Joe stays back where, I shot from, and I go and I little dip, and I'm on my way back up out of it to where the elk came right out on that ledge. And it wasn't really a ledge per se. It wasn't a big drop off, but it slanted down enough to make it almost like a ledge.
Right.
And I go up where this elk was standing, and I look around and I look behind where he was standing, and I see my arrow. And the first thing I looked for on that thing was the white fletching. And when I saw that fletching, it was pink. And I was like, holy moly, there's blood on that arrow. And I really couldn't believe it. And there was a lot of dew and a lot of moisture that morning. It had rained the night before for the first time in months. And so it was almost like a watery pink, like the arrow had gone through some brush and watered down the blood a little bit.
Yeah.
But needless to say, I went and got my arrow, and I mean, from the start, I knew I had a pass through. I've shot animals where you have cartilage and bone and all that on your arrow, and those track jobs don't really end too well from what I've noticed. If you remember that buck I shot with the crossbow.
Yep.
I mean, I saw the arrow hanging out of that thing. Me and you tracked him for miles or whatever it was, and everything should have said that deer was dead when he just wasn't. We never found him, but this arrow, it was just blood and no fat, no cartilage, nothing. So I'm thinking pass through, right? Pass through. And I don't know if at that point I started poloing you or not.
Yeah, that's when I got the first Marco Polo.
Yeah. And
I saw
believe it. Go ahead.
Oh, whenever I saw that, I was like, that's a dead elk.
Yeah. Well, I didn't jump that far ahead in the conclusions because the one thing about it where we were, I found a little bit of blood smatter, but we quickly lost a blood trail. And the foliage up there, just that little bush that grows on the side of those mountains, turns bright red. Its leaves, and they had already been turning, and I could not find blood for the life of me. Anything further than where he was standing. So I'm a terrible tracker. And so we waited there about 30 minutes, and we head off trying to find blood. And we both thought he went down the mountain. So we kind of just forged ahead. And I'm thinking, I'm looking for tracks and blood either or at this point, but I'm headed down the mountain sort of where I'm thinking he went. And somehow, some way on the side of that mountain, I had cell phone service. And that's when I poloed you and said,
that
hey.
is like a rarity.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure how that happened.
I don't know. It was something because it helped a lot because you told me. You remember what you told me?
I don't know. I don't remember what I said.
You basically told me to stop and go to the last spot that I had blood or track and don't move from that spot until I find blood or tracks because of boogering up the blood trail.
Oh
And
yeah.
in my impatience had me 80 yards down the side of this mountain. Well, so I went back and I started over, and I got on a track. I got on a track that I knew was, you know, an animal running, and any of our listeners, or I know there's a difference between a sprawled out hoof and an animal walking. You know, um, so I got on a track, and whether I was hands and knees or just hunched over, I just went literally from track to track. And an elk's a big animal for you not to have any sign. Um, and luckily, it wasn't down the mountain. It was just across the mountain. He didn't drop elevation immediately like it looked like. And your depth perception and the way things are laid out, even back home, but more so out here, things just look different than they actually are. And when you're trying to replay a moment back in your head and you're convinced something happened and it didn't happen that way,
Right.
you can really trip yourself up. So I found his tracks higher on the mountain than I thought he went. And, I started to get consistent tracks around the side of the hill. And at one of his tracks was at like a 90-degree angle straight up the mountain. And I thought, wow, that is weird. That is really weird. A wounded animal. Not only did he just turn on a dime, but like they don't go up the mountain. So I immediately, did the 90-degree that I thought he did, and I took a couple steps up the mountain, and it sort of rounded and flattened off just the slightest bit. After a couple steps, I looked up, and there was a bull elk that had expired from the arrow that had left my bow not more than 40 yards from where I shot this thing on the side of the mountain. And I think at that point I had sent you a polo, and I think that's on the YouTube channel, and to say that I was excited is an understatement. I mean, I was hooping and hollering on the side of the mountain, telling Joe that he needed to get up here and look at this thing. And because really it wasn't just like that day. It was a culmination of, and I don't want to be all whimsical and, just because at the end of the day, it is hunting. It's not the most important thing in the world. It really isn't. But I like to do it, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. And I time and effort and money into making sure I was ready for that moment. It's one thing to put yourself in position, but if you're just not confident that you can really do much, with your setup, or I mean, I had stood on my road that I live on and shot a bag after work, months leading up to this hunt to make sure that my Hoyt RX1 Ultra was tuned in. And I can't tune a bow perfectly and shoot it perfectly, but you know what I can do? I got it to the point where I was confident in that setup in my bow that I could hit something.
Yeah, but everybody knows a slick trick, viper trick with only an 1.16" cutting diameter won't kill a bull elk. Everybody knows that.
Well, you see, that might be true for anyone who's not on the Perry County Whitetails pro staff, but when you can place that slick trick in the upper lobe of both lungs of a bull elk, It'll get the job done. Thank you,
Yeah.
Slick Trick. We
We're waiting on that phone
we'd be
call.
proud. Yeah, we'd be happy to sponsor you. If you'd sponsor Perry County Whitetails.
Yeah.
But
I might even quit shooting QAD Exodus if they send us some free ones.
oh man, you know what that's like? That's like putting a sail on the front of your arrow. The little bit of a puff of wind with one of those things, and that thing is, oh my goodness, that thing looks like it's tailing off like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah. So, looking at the little video that we do have, it looks like the bull was quartered toward you, a little more than you thought
Yeah,
when you shot.
yeah,
His
yeah.
front,
He
his
was.
front.
I was. Oh, I guess I didn't even explain this, but we both thought I hit high because we saw the arrow impact the dirt behind where he was standing.
Oh, okay.
As we recalled it, and the shot was slightly high, which makes sense because when we ranged the two locations from where I shot from to the elk, I came up with 38 yards.
Yeah.
I hadn't ranged in the moment. I didn't have time for that. But field judging, and I had ranged prior at 52 yards. I figured he was at 40.
Which isn't, 2 yards. Not a big deal. It isn't going to go that much higher in 2 yards, is it?
No, I don't think so either, even at 40, but maybe slightly. But yes, the elk was quartered too, much more than I thought. And maybe as he looked at me, he kind of contorted his body a little bit that way, but it was definitely, entry was basically right at the crease, maybe maybe 2 inches back from the crease, and exit was almost out of the last rib area.
So you did the gutless method. So you never opened them up. You never opened them up and actually looked to see what the path was that the broadhead took?
Not the guts. There was not even a lot of damage to the ribs that I checked out. It's not like I hit and broke rib, I honestly think it went through a little section of ribs, and either I didn't even it might have exited out of the back of the last rib, like past the back of the last rib, and that might actually indicate how much he was actually quartering.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
needless to say, killed him.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to end this episode here.
Probably.
We got to get ready to go to church. But I do want to talk about on our next podcast about your quartering it up and hauling it out, and because this is the first time you've done any of that in the back country.
Yeah.
So there's a
let's do it.
All right. Fric and Frac podcast 1 in the books. How do you feel, Fric?
It's in the book.
Frac.
Well, Fric, if anyone's still listening at this point of the story, besides the sympathy family we have, those listeners, I'll be impressed. I'll be interested to see how your editing job does. You might have to shorten this up a little bit.
Yeah, might have to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, let's face it, you are in Bible school, so you are a little bit long-winded.
That's true. And when you're learning how to preach and getting all the fundamentals down, yeah. You're poured in. You're poured into so much. You only have you can only hold so much before it all starts coming out. So.
All right, man.
Okay.
Catch you on the flip side.
Sounds good. Talk to you later.
Yep.